Good day to you all. Today I'm going to focus on coping with conflict. Coping with conflict, right? So I'm going to define what is conflict. Um, I'm also going to discuss causes of conflicts, types of conflicts, benefits, and disadvantages of conflict within an organization. So we're going to focus on the definition, the benefits, the types of conflicts, the causes of conflicts within an organization, right? So you can find that conflict cannot be avoided within an organization, but it is the duty of management to make sure that they control and manage the conflict. So I'm going to define what is conflict, conflict, right? So in simple ways, conflict, it is defined as the disadvantage, so dissatisfaction or a disagreement between two or more groups within an organization. It can also be defined as a disharmony when people are not in harmony or when groups of people are not in harmony with each other within an organization. We call it a conflict that is taking place. Right? So I'm going to also define give another definition of conflict, which is the intrapersonal and extrapersonal confrontations caused by personal and work pressure, right? Sometimes you can encounter work pressure. For example, you are supposed you have a backlog and you are supposed to meet the deadline and then you cannot cope. Sometimes it might be personal pressure. Family problems can also result to conflict, whereby a person might not be able to copy, right? Right. So, an intrapersonal and interpersonal confrontations caused by personal and work pressure, which causes individuals not to copy. That's what you call conflict. Conflict, right? So conflict can also be defined as an intrapersonal or interpersonal confrontations caused by stimuli, arousal of incompatible motives or needs, resulting in disruption of normal functioning. Sometimes the needs or the motives might not be compatible, right? So that might maybe cause pressure on individual, whereby you'll be trying to what to cope to cope, right? So I'm going to define. So I'm also going to move on to the modern view of conflict. The modern view of conflict. I'm going to discuss the modern view of conflict, right? So we have what you call the traditional view, whereby we are saying it says conflict in an organization is detrimental and it should be avoided, saying it is determined. So we need to avoid the conflict. We need to avoid the conflict, should be avoided, right? And then we also have what you call the integrative, which has replaced the traditional view of conflict within an organization, which says conflict is normal and inevitable part of the human behavior. People, they are always have conflicting needs. They are always on conflict of a particular maybe nature. So what does it mean? Well, it is saying conflict should be properly controlled and managed. It is the duty of the management to make sure that they control the conflict and manage, because it cannot be avoided. It cannot be avoided within an organization, right? So I'm also going to move on to forms of conflicts, right? So I'm going to start by discussing the functional form, the functional conflict, whereby we're saying functional means meaning to say it's constructive, right? So it involves a mild level of conflict, right? So it is constructive in nature, meaning to say its occurrence can uh, be a beneficial to the organization. It is productive. It is a productive conflict whereby when it occurs, by solving it, you can find that there might be innovative ideas, creativity within an organization. So this type of conflict leads to a healthier interpersonal relationships. It can also lead to improved performance between individuals and also a positive organizational results. Right. So I'm saying this, the occurrence of functional conflict, it is a beneficial to the organization. It benefits the organization whereby relationships will be improved. Performance will be also improved since it brings in maybe creative ideas, and also innovative ideas and positive organizational results, meaning to say the organization is going to benefit in terms of maybe uh, productivity, productivity, right? I'm going to move on to another form of conflict, which is what you call dysfunctional conflict, dysfunctional conflict, dysfunctional conflict. So this one is an opposite of what? Of functional conflict, mean in the sense that it is destructive in nature, mean to say its occurrence can lead to loss of production, can lead to loss of production, or will lead to loss of production, meaning to say the occurrence um, um, this conflict can lead to loss of production, and you can find that it leads to breakdown of relationships within the organization, and performance becomes poor, and it will result in negative results. So it involves ever increasing levels of conflict, which is a continuous uh, increase of conflicts within an organization. So the occurrence can also disrupt the daily routine or the function of the organization to an extent that it might lead to loss of production within an organization, and also breakdown of relationships. People, employees or groups will see each other as opponents, right, or as enemies, right? So this will produce negative results, meaning to say productivity will suffer while that conflict is taking place, right? So I'm going to move on to uh, the types of conflicts, types of conflicts, type, types of conflicts, right? There are quite a number of types of conflict that I'm going to discuss. The first one that I'm going to discuss is what we call intrapersonal conflict, which is intra means within, personal, individual, right? Intra means within, and then personal means individual. So this type of conflict is conflict that occurs within a particular individual. Within you, you might experience what you call conflict. This type of conflict is normally caused by a boredom. For example, you are doing repetitive work like job rotation. It's not possible in that organization. You are bored, or you are frustrated. You're frustrated, or maybe you are experiencing what? Anxiety. You end up experiencing what you call intrapersonal conflict, interpersonal conflict, intrapersonal conflict, whereby you end up having a conflict within yourself because of a boredom, because of boredom. You are being bored at work, right? I'm going to move on to another type of conflict, which is what we call interpersonal. Inter normally means between people, between groups of people within the organization, between two or more people within an organization. For example, within an organization, people interact with each other. So sometimes conflicts might occur, right? So this type of conflict refers to interactions in which two or more people, right, within a group attempt to satisfy mutually incompatible needs. Sometimes individuals might have different needs or incompatible needs. So a state of tension can arise, which might also arise due to maybe opposing or conflicting patterns of behavior, right? For example, an extrovert and an introvert, when they're working together, right? It might also be another type of what conflict that might occur, right? So I'm going to move on to another type of conflict, which is what we call um, which is what we call another type of conflict, which is what we call conflict within a group, within a group, within, meaning to say, within a company, we might find that within a company, a group within a company, for example, within a company, we have departments, right? So you can find that individuals within the same group or in the same department might have a conflict, might have a conflict. Individuals within the same department or a group might experience conflict. That's what you call conflict within a group, right? So let's move on to another type of conflict, which is what you call intergroups conflicts. Intergroup for conflict. Here, we're talking about we're saying between groups. So this is a conflict which occurs between groups. For example, within an organization, we have a marketing group, which is a marketing department, finance department, production. So those departments might have conflict. Conflict. That's what we call intergroups conflict. Right. So I'm going to move on to another type of conflict, which is what you call conflict between management and staff. You can find that management and staff might have conflict. For example, it may be conflict maybe due to maybe remuneration, whereby maybe employees or staff members they want an increase in salaries, or maybe they want the management to improve the working conditions, right? So there will be conflict, right, between management and staff. So this conflict is normally resolved through negotiations, right? It can be resolved through negotiations. Conflict between management and staff. Sometimes maybe some senior employees, maybe people from senior who are on senior positions might tend to abuse junior employees. That might also result to conflict. That might also result to conflict, right? I'm going to move on to another type of conflict, which is what we call interorganizational, interorganizational conflict, interorganizational conflict, interorganizational conflict, whereby we are saying conflict which exists between competing organizations, organizations that are providing the same services or the same goods, they might compete, right? Competition, right? They are organizations that are in competition. So conflict might also exist between organizations that are offering the same product to customers or in the market, or the same service. They might have a conflict, right? And then lastly, we have what you call community or social conflict, whereby it is caused by maybe political views of individuals within a community. It might be a social view or economical view, or it might be religious differences, which cause members of the same community to have conflict, right? For example, we're talking about the Muslims and the Christian community. You can find that there is always conflict. There is always conflict because they have differences in what and beliefs and values, right? So I'm going to move on as well to how to cope with conflict, how to cope with conflict, coping with conflict. So the first point that I'm going to discuss is what you call causes of conflict. So I'm going to discuss how conflicts are caused, what causes conflicts. right? The first point that I'm going to discuss is differences in training and development, right? You can find that individuals within an organization might have differences in training and development. That might also lead to conflict. That might also lead to conflict. And then it might be also due to poor communication. For example, when important information is not communicated to employees, there might be conflict between management and employees, or maybe information that was supposed to be communicated through formal channels. Maybe it might happen that it can, and then people will communicate using incorrect channels. Communication can also, poor communication can also cause what? Conflict. And then working environment whereby employees they are experiencing maybe poor working conditions like uh, aeration, poor aeration, like noise environment. It also causes conflict within an organization. The next point that I'm going to discuss is intercultural differences, whereby employees from different cultures might be employed by the organization. So differences in culture can also influence what? Conflict, can also causes conflict within an organization, whereby some employees from other cultures might be stereotyping, or they believe or think that their culture is more superior than other culture. That might also result to conflict. It might also be differences in what? In goals and values, whereby maybe two individuals or two groups within an organization have different goals and different values that they want to achieve. For example, when management and employees have different goals that they want to achieve, that might also cause what? Conflict. Sometimes it will be another point that I'm going to discuss is conflicting personalities, an extrovert and an introvert, whereby sometimes an extrovert will end up dominating the group, right? And the introvert might end up dominating the group. That might result to conflict. Or maybe the introvert who is shy and withdrawn might end up feel like he is targeted, or his attitude towards employees, right, will be maybe not correct, whereby he end up feels that people are attacking him because of his personality, right? That might also result to conflict. And then it might also be caused by poor self-image. When you're working with an employee or a colleague who has a poor self-image, right? So he tend to to be aggressive, because he might feel that uh, people are not respecting him because he lacks poor he lacks self-confidence, right? So these are causes of conflict, which I've mentioned, right? Differences in training and development. It might be poor communication, working conditions which are poor, and then intercultural barriers or differences. It might be different goals and values. It also might be conflicting personality and poor self-image, right? So I'm going to move on I'm going to discuss results of conflicts. Results of conflicts, right? Remember, we talked about forms of conflicts whereby we discussed functional and dysfunctional, right? So let's discuss the results of conflict. So you can find that conflict can be a beneficial to the organization, right? Or it can be a what? A disadvantage to the organization. So let's talk about conflict as a potential beneficial to the organization. Positive results to be gained from conflicting situations. So you can find that when it is a functional conflict, you can find that it exposes problems. Problems are exposed and they can be addressed. And you can find that it leads to a healthy self-criticism. People can be able to criticize each other in a healthy manner. And also, it can lead to creativity and discovery of talents. Creativity and discover, whereby we're saying when the occurrence of the conflict um, uh, will help the the discovery of talents, whereby innovative people or creative people can be able to be discovered because of conflict, right? I'm going to move on to disadvantages. Disadvantages or potential negative results of conflicts. Potential negative results of conflicts. So you can find that when employees within an organization are experiencing conflict, you can find that they will have physical and mental stress, even fatigue, that they'll be experiencing physical stress, mental stress, and fatigue. You can find that it leads to defensive behavior. Employees will end up defending themselves because they will say, not, I'm doing this because we are not happy or we are having a conflict, right? It can also lead to wastage of time and energy, whereby employees will end up devoting their time in arguing rather than being productive. So time and energy is wasted, right? It can also contribute to the delayed poor decisions, whereby decisions are delayed, right? And also poor decisions are made, right? It also creates a deadlock whereby there is no solution that was maybe no solution that was to resolve that conflict. Right. It can also lead to disruption of communication, whereby communication will be distorted. Can be distorted, and then channels of communication are flattered, right? Whereby the other level can bypass another level of authority because of conflict, right? And also, you can find that it negatively influences the external image of the organization. An organization that is always at conflict or experiencing conflicts has a negative relationship, has a negative image in the business environment. No one would want to work for an organization that is always experiencing a high level of conflict, right? So I'm just going to move on to how to cope with conflict. So I'm going to discuss the general guidelines for coping with interpersonal conflict, the general guidelines for coping with interpersonal conflict, whereby we are going to discuss on the guidelines on how one can cope with interpersonal conflict, right? So the first point that I'm going to discuss is you are supposed to focus on the problem and not the person. Do not attack the person who is, or the parties that are on conflict, but attack the problem. Try to resolve the problem rather than to attack or to focus on the person who is on the opposite party, right? And also make sure that you focus on the facts. Meaning to say, you're supposed to be specific. You're supposed to avoid avoid accusations. Be specific. Work on the facts. Work on the facts, right? And then you're supposed to be objective. You're supposed to be objective when you are solving a conflict, whereby you are supposed to make sure that you control your emotions. You need to control your emotions. You need to control your emotions. You need to control your emotions. Control your emotions and make sure that um, You need to control your emotions. You need to control your emotions, be objective, right? And then make sure that you are not influenced or controlled by emotions of others, right? And also you need to make sure that you respect the opposing party's dignity. You need to make sure that you respect the opposing party dignity. Avoid uh, avoid um, attack remarks, right? That might also become hostile, is it, to another party. And also make sure that you show interest in the opposing, you show interest in the opposing party's view, meaning to say you are supposed to make sure that you are a good listener. And by doing it, you are supposed to be patient. So you need to make sure that you allow the other person time to express their views. You need to allow them to express their views, right? Show interest in the opposing party. Be a good listener. Allow them to to express their views, right? Um, Let's move on to the methods used to resolve conflict. Methods used to resolve conflict. So I'm going to discuss the first method, that is avoidance, whereby from the word avoid, meaning to say the problem or the conflict is deliberately ignored. The conflict is deliberately ignored. It is deliberately ignored. It is deliberately ignored. The conflict is ignored, right? So by ignoring the conflict, what does it mean? It becomes a loss situations on both sides. It results in a loss, loss situation whereby both parties are not going to win, right? So this method is also called an attitude of let the problem go away. It is also what you call, it is also called an attitude of let the problem go away, whereby the management can just ignore, just say, let it go away. We are not going to be involved. It will die down, right? So it is also called procrastination, whereby they procrastinate to solve it, to understand that something may be important will come down will come up, maybe a new project whereby those two opposing parties will end up working together, right? So it will die down on its own. Right. So let's move on to another one, which is what you call accommodation. Accommodation, which is a process whereby uh, people or individuals or parties in a group adjust, they adjust to maintain harmony. They adjust to maintain harmony. They adjust to maintain harmony, all right, within a group. They adjust to maintain harmony. All right. They want to maintain harmony. So this normally becomes a, a win-win situation. A win-win situation, right? Accommodating another person, right? And then we also have what you call another method that I'm going to discuss is subordination. Subordination, whereby the opposing party or conflicting party will suppress their differences to achieve a goal, right? Both parties will suppress their differences in order to achieve a goal. All right. They suppress their differences. They suppress their differences in order to achieve a goal, right? So this one, it's no party will win. So it becomes a loss situation, a loss situation, right? Because they have suppressed their differences so that they can solve a problem, right? So let's move on to compromising. Compromising, right? When you are compromising, you are saying, what are you saying? You are saying you satisfy the requirements of each party. If you do this, I will do this, right? Whereby both parties are satisfying the requirements of each other. Both parties, they are satisfying the requirements of each other. Both parties are satisfying the requirements of each other, right? That's what we call compromisation. We meet halfway. We meet halfway, right? That's compromising. So in this case, everyone will win. So it gives a win-win situation. Win-win situation. It gives a win-win situation. Everyone will win. Every party will win. Both parties will win, right? Also, you have what we call mediation. Mediation, whereby the organization might involve a third party or an outsider, right? Part to assist both conflicting parties to reach an agreement. It involves an outsider, right? An outsider to assist both parties, both parties to reach an agreement, right? They can call an outsider so that he can assist to reach an agreement, right? And then we have what we call arbitration, whereby when negotiation fails to solve the problem, when negotiation fails to solve the problem, the conflicting parties who agree to submit their dispute to an external impartial arbitrator. So here, an external impartial arbitrator will be called to solve the problem. So an arbitrator can give a final and binding decision, can give a final and binding decision to the problem. A volunteer arbitrator is whereby when he gives a decision, both parties might agree or disagree with the solution, right? And then lastly, we have what we call cooperation and problem solving, whereby parties uh, are working together. They are working together. Cooperation. Parties are working together to solve a problem. Parties are working together to solve to solve a problem. So what they will do, they put their differences aside so that they attack the problem, so that they will come up with solution. To solve a problem, they work together. They will ignore their differences so that they can work together to solve a problem. Right. So these are methods used to solve conflict. We have avoidance, from the word avoiding, accommodation, whereby you adjust, parties are just in order to come out with a solution. And then subordination, whereby we suppress our differences. No one will win, right? And then compromise, whereby both parties satisfy the requirements of each party. We compromise. And then mediation, we look for an outsider to come in and help us to reach a solution. And arbitration, who will give a decision. And then cooperation, whereby two parties who are in conflict, they will meet and then forget their differences. They work together to solve a problem. All right. So let's move on to formal mechanism for solving conflict. We have what you call grievance procedure, right? Whereby uh, when employees have a dispute, they lodge what you call a grievance procedure. When employees have a dispute, they lodge what you call a grievance procedure. With the management. They lodge a, a grievance procedure to to the the management. A disciplinary action whereby management can call in employee for a disciplinary hearing, whereby he will be his behavior will be whereby when you are talking about the disciplinary action, it is done by management to employees. For example, to discipline an individual so that he can change his behavior, right? So thank you so much. I think I'm going to end here, right? So don't forget to hit the subscription button so that when I post, you'll be able to see, or you'll be able to receive the notification. Have a good day.